My part of the study of Fukushima effectively started about 5 years ago when I, having written a student textbook looking at advanced aspects of physics and how it interacted with medicine and all sorts of other things, which you see on the left there, realized that there was a disconnect between public perceptions of radiation, between radiation as used in medicine, to great benefit for our general health, and radiation as it is regulated in the environment. And I was extremely unhappy about this, and I set myself the challenge: could I put down in words that people would understand, and with the benefit of some people in this room, and also various journalists and so on, and my daughter and my wife, none of whom know anything about science, could I put it down? And that was the book that I wrote, and has now been appeared in Japanese. So I come from entirely on the outside, as it were, having looked at this problem independently of the Fukushima experience. And having been up to last weekend, I was immensely impressed that after 6 months, you can see all of the fields and the shops and the houses that have been deserted and left shut up. And one can imagine the human suffering and the stress and the disconnect in families and so on that are hidden behind that. So the main question is, the first question is, where does this element of fear come from? Why did we ever, or do we, consider radiation as a peculiar risk above fire and driving cars and all the rest of it? And I've identified 3 reasons. The first is connected with the history of the Cold War and the fear of a nuclear holocaust, where fear of radiation was actually quite an important part of the political balance in the Cold War, and it worked, but we still live and still have the shadow of that threat in our lives, and that seems to be, time has changed. Nobody is going to detonate thousands of nuclear weapons anymore, and that is the language that I was brought up in the 60s and 70s. The second reason is that you cannot feel radiation, and this is very understandable. If you can't feel something, you don't know how to get out of its way, and there are 2 answers to that. One is that you can, well, like if you go into a dark room, you turn the light on. You want a way of detecting what is in the room. So with radiation, you should have radiation detectors, and a radiation detector, well, a smoke alarm is in fact a radiation detector, and such detectors could be extremely cheap. The other comment is actually more interesting, and that is that the cells of our bodies can detect radiation. They just don't tell head office about it when they do, but they, as we know now from the biology, they get on and repair the damage and indeed learn to adapt to it to a certain extent. So we shouldn't be as worried as we all are by radiation, because the body is actually coping with a lot of it without telling us, and I'm going to show you how we know that. And the third reason is that the regulations say that radiation is at dangerous levels, and we need to look at where that kind of statement is coming from, because there are misunderstandings there, and we all share responsibility for that to a certain extent. Radiation, the effect of radiation depends on dose, and it all depends also on the period over which you have the dose. Just like paracetamol tablets, if you take 100 all at once, you better book a taxi to the hospital. If you have that 100 tablets spread out over 2 or 3 weeks, you will have cured yourself with a few headaches, and there's no danger to that at all. So just like the paracetamol tablets, we should not be surprised if radiation spread out in time can be coped with by the body, but we will need to see some data on that. Most of us today benefit from radiation diagnostic scans, and it was the realization of the kind of benefits that we get from that and the doses involved and the internal and external radiation that I wanted to share a bit with you. A CT scan is basically an external dose of X-rays, and to give the nice pictures that we have today, you need 5 to 10 millisieverts of external radiation for that. Equally, or instead, or also, you can have a PET or a SPECT scan, in which case you will be injected with radioactive material into your body, which will go around your body, and that can be imaged. I don't know whether people don't seem to realize that. That is an internal source. And this has been going on for a long time, and there are enormous benefits to this. And of course, we trust our doctors, and they are very careful that we don't come to any harm. So typically, a screening PET and CT scan gives you a whole body dose of about 15 millisieverts. So the radiation and radioactivity that has come out of Fukushima is also a mixture of internal and external sources. They're not the same in detail, but their effects on the human body are not that different. So how does this compare with the risks of food safety? Let us look at the regulations which were passed down by the government in their publication of the 27th of July of this year, when they said that eating 1 kilogram of meat with a regulation limit of 500 becquerels per kilogram gives you a dose of 0.008 millisieverts. Now, I sat down and with my physics, not looking at anybody else's answers at all, and to work out what I thought the effect of 1 kilogram of 500 becquerels per kilogram of meat should be, and I came up, somewhat to my surprise, with exactly the same answer. So I could check the Japanese government here. Now, if you ingest cesium into your body from meat, it is there for about a half-life of about 4 months, because cesium doesn't really belong in the body, and it gets washed out with the usual turnover of body material and is excreted, and that has been studied in depth and is well known. Now, radioactive cesium it doesn't go particularly to any particular organ like iodine, and it's spread more or less throughout the body, in particular in the muscle, and the agent is, just like the radioactive fluorine in a PET scan. In a PET scan, you get the dose in a couple of hours. From the cesium, you get it, as I say, over about 4 weeks. Now, we can divide those two numbers by one another and see how much meat you would have to eat in 4 months to get the same dose that you got from the PET and CT scan, which presumably you were quite happy about because your doctor advised you to have it. And the answer is 2,000 kilograms. Now, I don't recommend anybody to eat 2,000 kilograms of meat, but that's not a radiation problem. The regulation, as it stands, is unreasonable. That doesn't mean to say it's wrong, because regulations are to do with what people accept. I just mean from the scientific point of view. Now, this kind of problem was admitted in Norway and Sweden, and I just wanted to share with you what Norway said. Sorry, it's on the next slide. Where does this all come from? It comes from the recommendations taken up by the Japanese government, quite rightly so, from the International Commission on Radiological Protection, who provide international advice. And it's their standards that are, I think, need substantial revision. And I'll come later to the question of why they are in error. Basically, because we all marched, demonstrated, voted, and so on in the era of the Cold War to reduce any radiation in our lives to an absolute minimum. And so they enacted or drew up advice which reduces radiation to as low as reasonably achievable. But that's not a safety level. That's just as low as you can reasonably get, somewhere near the kind of level that we get from out of rocks and from space and the other sources of radiation. But anyway, 15 millisieverts is not a dangerous level because we get it in PET and CT scans, and we're presumably quite happy with it. Here is an extract from a paper presented by some authors at a meeting in Washington in 1998 from the Norwegian Radiation Protection Authority. And it tells the story that at the time of Chernobyl, 6 months afterwards, in November of 1986, they raised the intervention level not from 600 kilograms, becquerels per kilogram, which it had been, to 6,000 becquerels per kilogram. And the reason they did that was because the effect on the reindeer breeders and the farmers and so on had been so disastrous. And we see there are similar kinds of effects being happening in this country as a result of the very harsh regulations which have been made with the best possible intentions from the ICRP. At Chernobyl, there are some workers who did receive fatal doses in the initial putting out of the fire. But no worker with less than 2,000 millisieverts died from acute radiation syndrome, which is the illness in where the body gets so much radiation that it shuts down. It's nothing to do with cancer. And it happens rather quickly, in a few weeks. At Fukushima, the TEPCO figures, which have also been accepted by the American Nuclear Society, record that 30 workers have received doses between 100 and 250 millisieverts. That's a tenth of the lowest dose from which a worker dies at Chernobyl. And so we can see that will be no deaths from acute radiation syndrome at Fukushima. Of course, all this depends on trust, as Professor Tokuhiro emphasized. Trust and confidence are absolutely essential. And that is why I've started talking from medical experience, because I think when the chips are down, all of us do trust the medical profession and the advice that they give and the numbers that we get from them. So it seems to me this is a base from which one could start to build trust in radiation. Of course, radiation is also used to cure cancer. That means that the cells in the cancerous tumor are killed by the radiation. So they have to get a fatal dose. And in this treatment, the tumors get doses like 2,000 millisieverts per day, and the course goes on for several weeks, as some of you may be aware, and some of you people in this room may have had such treatment. The problem is that to get the radiation dose into your body through the skin and past the various organs, an awful lot of it is deposited, a lot of the energy, the millisieverts, go in the wrong places, into organs which must survive if you're going to have a reasonable quality of life afterwards. And the medical profession know how to do this. And so in a typical radiotherapy session, the healthy parts of your body get doses up to 1,000 millisieverts every day for many days, which is like 20,000 millisieverts a month. That's interesting because, for a start, it's 5 times the fatal dose that was found at Chernobyl. Is this data credible? Well, as I said, most of us know somebody who has had such treatment. What's happening? There's a scientific question here. What is happening is that in each daily treatment, the healthy organs are getting 1,000 millisieverts and just have time to recover most of their function and get repaired before what happens on the following day. And the cancerous tumor cells just don't have enough time to recover. And the net result is that after several weeks, that most of the tumor cells are dead and most of the healthy cells are still in business. That is why a radiotherapy treatment goes on and on and on for so long. It makes it very expensive and very inconvenient, or rather nasty for people who have it. So the message of this is radiotherapy wouldn't work if, in fact, biology did not repair damage from radiation. Quite quickly, actually within hours, certainly within days, there are several processes going on. I like to think or refer to a period of a month and look at the radiation doses in a month, but that is very conservative. Now, the evacuation criteria, or the level at which decisions were taken, were looking at 20 millisieverts per year, which is rather different than 20,000 millisieverts per month, although admittedly that's 20 millisieverts per year to the whole body, whereas 20,000 millisieverts per month is to a relatively local area of perhaps 10 centimeters or so in extent. But it's still true that the radiotherapy equivalent is very, very large compared with what people are being forced out of their homes for, with enormous personal damage and stress levels, as the doctor who we met in Minami-Soma city was telling us about. So the way that these criteria have been set up, according to the International Committee, to have made no concession for the damage to personal and social and economic health associated with the evacuation. Now, unfortunately, you only have to look in the literature to look and see what happened at Chernobyl, and as recently as the 28th of February 2011, just before, a few days before the earthquake, when the latest UN report on Chernobyl came out, which confirmed the conclusions of the IAEA report and others in 2006, that there was far more damage done to the social structure, people's mental health, stress levels, and so on. This was a far bigger health problem than any effect possibly due to the radiation. One wonders whether these reports have been read and the lessons applied to Fukushima. Certainly the advice from the ICRP has not been updated in this respect. Of course, I haven't said anything about radiation-induced cancer yet, because sometimes these correction mechanisms fail. And one of those protection mechanisms, is the immune system. And as we get older, and I'm getting older, and with poor health, the immune system isn't what it was, and it's old people who get cancer. Now, there are certainly aspects where children are more at risk from radiation than adults, but there are also situations, if I put in my vote, where older people are more at risk from radiation than children, because their immune system is very good indeed, but they are growing. So there are arguments on both sides, and the medical fraternity would not be able to tell us exactly which way it goes. The other thing, it is not possible to distinguish cancers which are caused by radiation from cancers produced by other sources of radiation. So it has to be looked at statistically, and you need a large population of people who have been highly irradiated and another lot of people who haven't been irradiated to compare them with. And the most important set of data of this kind are from the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where the radiation levels were high. The records have been followed for 50 years, and there were a large number of people. The average dose was 160 millisieverts, and the average cancer risk increased by 1 in 15. So those survivors who died of cancer, 14 out of 15 of them would have died of cancer anyway, but there were 1 in 15 more of them. Higher doses do show increased risk. Here's a table in which I invite you to look at the different rows where the dose on the left-hand column is slowly increasing. And at high doses, the extra risk per 1,000 is up near 10%. It's very large. But for those who receive doses of less than 100 millisieverts, the extra risk is consistent with 0, even in this extraordinarily large set of data, which I hope is not ever repeated again. So it cannot be a big thing. It is perfectly respectable and sensible to consider that below 100 millisieverts, that's a single acute dose, there is no radiation risk. Now, one of the problems in understanding numbers is to see them graphically, as it were, before the eye. So on this slide, I've represented doses in terms of by areas. And so you see the big red area is the dose to a tumor in cancer therapy, and that's greater than 40,000 millisieverts per month, and those cells die. The off-red rectangle refers to the dose per month for healthy tissue, and that is tolerated by members of the public under exceptional conditions. Not regularly, under exceptional conditions, that is can be considered as a net benefit. Down at the bottom, with a little arrow pointing to it, is the ICRP public as low as reasonably achievable level, which is 1 millisievert per year or 0.1 millisievert per month, which is has an area which is almost invisible on this slide. My suggested level for a revision of this safety level is 100 millisieverts per month, which is 200 times lower than what is tolerated happily or willingly anyway by a radiotherapy patient, but is already 1,000 times bigger than the ALARA level. I don't think I've got time to go into any details. There are certainly a lot of qualifications to be made about this, and these are only suggestions which others will chew over when I can get them to give attention to the matter. But it does represent a relaxation of radiation safety levels by a factor of about 1,000 in moving from levels which were designed to reassure people to levels which are actually show where danger sets in. It's possible, I said nobody will die of acute radiation syndrome at Fukushima. the 30 workers who received doses in the range of 100 to 200 millisieverts, according to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki data, 1 in 150 of those is likely to die, contract cancer and die in the next 50 years, but there aren't 150. So the chances are considerably less than 1, and it gives us the real hope that nobody should die even of cancer in the next 50 years from as a result of Fukushima. Then, of course, there's iodine and thyroid cancer. And as Professor Tokuhiro has already said, the seaweed in the Japanese diet gives enormous protection here. And anyway, so I don't expect anybody to die from child thyroid cancer. There were only 15 deaths at Chernobyl, which was certainly a bigger release in this respect, at least much more into the air than at Fukushima, which is the main problem. Of course, iodine decays with a half-life of 8 days, and I think it's down by a factor of 2 million now. So the iodine story is all over. It's past, it's finished. And when you see press reports that say that more iodine has been discovered, I think they better go back and make their measurements again. So I expect there will be no deaths from radiation at Fukushima. I expect that there will be many, many, many deaths from fear of radiation at Fukushima. So that's really summing up my conclusions. Mental health, self-confidence, and livelihood in communities which were described very well by the mayor of Itachi when we spoke to him. I was very impressed with the way he was approaching his community's problems. It's fear that is the problem, and in particular, appeasing fear by lowering the regulations and telling people not to worry doesn't work. People are quite capable of making their own decisions and having their own worries. If governments reduce regulations and say, there, don't worry, it doesn't work. So I think radiation is not a big threat to mankind. We've got real problems and a list of things there which I think do represent real hazards, but radiation, rather like road traffic accidents, is a problem that we should have learnt to live with. This is going to, I suggest, require new, fresh education. And I spend a lot of time in the UK going around talking in pubs and clubs and to students and the like, informing people, explaining to people, reassuring them, to get them to understand about radiation from the bottom up, because this is not really a problem that government can impose trust and confidence from above. It's got to come from underneath, and that means that it'll take a long time and a lot of effort by a lot of people. So I think we've all got to learn to use nuclear radiation for the benefit of society in the same way and with the same care and respect that, in fact, we already do when we use it for our own personal health with the advice of our doctors.